Mukatra.
Yes.
Chair, I'd like to just check how many members are present in the meeting this afternoon out of the total in terms of quorum.
Well, we only received about 2 apologies. So we should be having about 9 members present.
Is Shanaza able to verify that? Apologies, Chair, so that we can make sure that we meet quorum before we pass, before we agree on the report.
Okay, we need 6.
Yes.
So it's myself, it's yourself, Honorable Mukatra, it's Honorable Gates, Honorable Ngogo, it's Honorable Litsie. I don't know who else. I've already counted 5.
Yeah.
Is there any other?
Chair.
Pardon?
So we short 1 chair, we must be 6.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought we were 6. Ma'am Svia, has she joined us?
She has not joined, and then I know the prof accepted the meeting invite, but I don't see her on yet. And Mananiso I don't see on.
We've got the apology of not Dada.
Yes.
And
Yabo.
Yeah, as well as Honorable Mananiso.
As well as?
Honorable Mananiso, she's on study leave.
Okay. I think we can add, there's someone who just entered.
Okay, so Honorable Bozoli.
Yeah.
Are you in the house, Honorable Bozoli? I see Honorable Bozoli has joined, but it looks like her mic is still muted.
Sorry, yes, I'm in the house. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. We are going through the reports. We thought that we should take the 2 reports, the 2 budget reports quickly within the first 30 minutes. So we have started with the DHET. We are taking comments from the members. Okay, any other comment, honorable members? I think we form a quorum to proceed. No comment. Can I get recommendations on the adoption of the report with all the...
Chair, do we not go through, Chair, sorry.
Pardon?
Do we not go through the report page by page? That's what we've done in the past. I don't know if that's not your custom.
Okay, no, I've already commented on that one. We're not going to take them page by page. We take it that members have read the reports. If there's any comment, you can just comment. You can refer us to whatever page that you want to comment on. Okay, can we get a recommendation by members since there are no comments on the report? The only comment we've received is from the EFF, Honorable Gates. We note that comment. In the absence of further comments, can I take it that we adopt the report? Honorable Gates, and then followed by Honorable Litsie will be followed by Honorable Bozoli, and then Gates. Litsie.
Somebody is muting my mic. I'm unmuting here.
Now we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. I was unmuting myself and somebody was muting me on the other side. I just wanted Chairperson to, on the recommendations, to welcome 8.4.1, the stimulus relief fund for SAQA, as proposed by the committee to the minister. And with that, I propose that we adopt the report as it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any seconder to the recommendation for the? Oh, we've got Honorable Bozzoli. Honorable Bozzoli, can come in?
No, it's fine, Chair. Thanks, I'm covered.
Okay. You want to come back again, Honorable Gates? Okay.
We're fine. As long as you are going to note our rejection to the budget, we are not giving them money if they are not doing what we are expecting.
Well, you have said that already. It's okay.
Yeah, so we have to clarify that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any second?
Chair, sorry, before we say, sorry, can I just come in? We are instructed by our Chief Whip to reserve our rights on the budget. We do not want this report, any approval of this report, to imply that's the budget.
Okay. So
Thank you.
The DA reserves the right on the report. It's accepted. I'm still looking for a seconder to the report. Any seconder? Or can I get any person who objects to the adoption of the report? No objection.
Chair, can I?
Yeah.
Chair, may I make? There are some spelling and grammar mistakes in the report. What do we do about those?
Okay, those ones we can then make note of them and then send them to the Secretariat. You can send them to Anele to make those corrections. As long as they are not material, it's okay.
Yes.
Grammatical, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Honorable Ngobo, you are seconding.
Yes, I'm seconding, Chairperson. Chairperson, although we are not entirely happy with everything in the report, but the IFP does not have a problem seconding the report, the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. The first report is therefore agreed to with those comments from the EFF and the DA. The second one on science and innovation. Can I get an indication from the members? Are these new hands or the hands for the previous? Honorable Litsie?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. No comment. And on the recommendations, I think we are very push for the adoption of the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other taker?
Yes, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Also, the same thing that applied on the DHET should also apply with the DSI. We will also have to note that the EFF does not agree that we should give money where it's not worth it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Is Honorable Bozzoli's hand up?
Yes, Chair. My hand is up.
Okay.
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering about it. Thank you. In the recommendations, in our comments as a committee, I think the report is very well written, and it does capture our unease with the tier and how basically it's failing in its mission. But I'm wondering whether in our recommendations we are on the tier. 6.11 of the recommendations, it should resolve these executive structure vacancies as a matter of urgency. That's good. But and then 6.12, the tier should be more visible. But I do believe we need to put in a more forceful sentence or two there, just saying we are not happy with tier in multiple ways, as expressed in our observations.
Okay. I think that's in order. Can we get any further comment?
Chair, may I continue with the same point that I made under the last report, which is the DA reserves its rights. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, I think we do accept that comment about tier. That's exactly what we said when we engage with the department and tier. We expressed a serious reservation about that organization. So I think it must be in the recommendations. With that, can I get a seconder for the report? Who wants to second? Honorable members, no one is willing to second. Honorable members?
Yes,
Yeah.
Chairperson, with the comments that have been made already, I'm not going to repeat them. I rise to second the adoption.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Ngcobo. That then brings us to the end of the two reports. Thank you very much, honorable members. I think the reports will be 80 seat accordingly. With the comments from the EFF as well as the DA. Can we then move to the next item and get briefings from the Gender Commission or Commission on Gender Equality as well as DSI? Which one do we start with?
Gender Commission, the Gender Commission, Chair.
We start with the Gender Commission. Let's give them, I think we still have a bit more time, so we can go through until 4:30, and then we will have 1.5 hours for engagements. So let's give the Gender Commission 40 minutes. Will take us through their report. Welcome the leadership of the Commission. You will introduce yourself as you take us through your report.
Good afternoon to you, Honorable Chairperson. I would like to send my greetings to the whip, the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, Science and Technology. And I just want to say thank you very much for inviting us to this session this afternoon. With me, first, my name is Tamara Matebula. I am the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality. With me, I have two commissioners. I have Commissioner Dibiela Mutupi, and I have Commissioner Lindy Wenduli Tlobatla. And we have our CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Keketso Mayema, and our Legal Officer, Ms. Marisa Fanikek. Chairperson, this afternoon we are here to present our report as per the invite. Basically, just by way of introducing ourselves, we are the Commission for Gender Equality. which is an institution that was established in terms of Section 181 of the Constitution of 1996. In terms of Section 187, subsection 1 of the Constitution, the Commission for Gender Equality is mandated specifically to promote respect for gender equality and the protection, the development, and the attainment of gender equality in the country. We are also mandated to monitor, investigate, research, educate, advise, and report on issues concerning gender equality. We also assess the observance of gender equality throughout the country and beyond the borders of this country. The Commission for Gender Equality Act number 39 of 1996, as amended, further supplements the powers of the Commission for Gender Equality to fulfill its constitutional mandate. The powers to investigate are given and are amplified as per Section 11, subsection 1E of the Commission for Gender Equality. So, Honorable Chairperson, we are investigating, or we have investigated, the institutions of higher learning using our mandate. And this afternoon, we are here to present the investigative report on gender transformation in institutions of higher learning. This report, Chairperson, is one of many reports, because we did not look at the few institutions of higher learning, but we looked at the entire 22 institutions out of 26 universities in the country at the time. So this afternoon, we will present the findings of the public investigative hearings on gender transformation. These hearings, particularly with the institutions that are outlined, the 4 institutions that we will be talking about, were hosted by the Commission for Gender Equality in 2016, where we hosted the investigative hearings, and we also hosted these institutions in November 2019, respectively. The institutions in questions, Honorable Chair, were subpoenaed, and when we subpoena, we usually subpoena the vice chancellors of those institutions as leaders of the institutions. They were subpoenaed to come and appear before us, before the Commission for Gender Equality, and to respond to a set of questions relating to gender transformation in those universities. Not only respond, honorable members, but to furnish us with a lot of information that we required, such as copies of policies that have been developed, that have been reviewed, that have been adopted as per our recommendations. We also asked them to actually make sure that when they develop those policies, they align with the country laws and legislations and policies, such as the Employment Equity Act number 55 of 1996. Also align with Skills Development Act of 1998, and also align with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act number 75 of 1997, including the Labor Relations Act number 66 of 1995. We have looked at what the institutions have developed so far, honorable members, and we have looked at other efforts that the institutions have made in terms of making sure that they move towards gender transformation and they realize gender transformation within their institutions. Honorable Chair, without waste of time, I am going to hand over to our Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Mayema, to make a formal presentation in the next 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. CEO?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, and good afternoon, honorable members. I take it that the presentation that was circulated, members would have it right in front of them at this stage. And so with regard to that presentation, I will not, get into the mandate. I think the presentation highlights the mandate, but I will go directly and start from slide 5, where we are highlighting, the background in terms of the process. And I do think that the chair as well has tried to highlight some of the background information as far as the work that we undertook. In 2018-2019, we embarked on this process of gender transformation, as it has already been highlighted, where we were looking specifically into tertiary institutions. And because of budget limitations, it's always difficult for us to go national all at once. And so we do year on year look into specific institutions of higher learning. Some of the processes that we embarked on were also influenced by quite a number of things. I think there have been quite a number of obvious media reports that were looking into quite a number of issues, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's sexual harassment, but as well, there has been some new things that we're seeing that were coming up that relates to sex for marks. And so over and above, the transformation agenda, which we look into in terms of checking how we are faring as a country on issues of gender equality and transformation generally, but at the back of that specific matter, there were obviously those specific issues that I have highlighted. And so we then engaged with institutions as a way to try and check how they are doing and what is the kind of processes that they are following. The chair has already indicated that in that financial year, we looked specifically into University of Zululand, Nelson Mandela, so Plaatje, Mpumalanga, but as well, whenever we engage with institutions of higher learning, we also make sure that we engage with the Department of Higher Education itself. And so across all the hearings that we have held, we have had the department as well there to engage with them as a respondent, but also to request them that they are able to stay in, throughout the week that we hold these processes, that they are able to hear what we are putting forward when we are engaging with some of these institutions. And so we looked, I'll start specifically with UniZulu in terms of the work that we undertook. The chair has already highlighted that we look into policies, we look into quite a number of processes, and we then analyze. We give them we give them a questionnaire, and in that questionnaire we endeavor to try and get various information running from the number of positions that they have in top eloquence, and try and get the statistics in terms of how many positions are for the breakdown, female, male, people with disability. We look into policies, and in terms of the policies, we also try and check what are the kind of policies that they have. Are they themselves following these policies? Are these policies that they have in any way going to assist them in ensuring that we follow, the gender transformation agenda that we have as a country and the like? So those are, the specific matters that we go into. And because I've got a lot of universities chair, and because we had already circulated this particular presentation, I may not go, slide by slide, where there are numbers there that members are welcome, to have looked in terms of how much of personnel was there, and how many females, when we look into breakdown, females versus males, where are the majority of females concentrated. I think in this, it's very clear that, and in a lot of institutions, quite frankly, we do see a situation where the concentration of our female employees are always right at the bottom, at administrative kind of level positions and the like. So I won't get into, those particular numbers. The numbers are there from...
Can I interject a little bit? Can we request that you share your slides with us, so that as you go slide by slide, then we're able to follow? Are you able to do that?
I'm going to try. I thought, Anel, are you going to give me the screen, or should I send it to you so that... Is Anel in the meeting?
Yes.
You have
just...
the slides. Don't you have the screen on? You have the rights to the screen, isn't it?
You can click share on the screen and also share the presentation.
Yo, why does it look like I'm having problems here?
Okay, there is a share button at the bottom of your screen. So if you can just click on that and then share whatever documents that you have, PowerPoint.
That's the thing. I'm not locating my... Let me just check. I'm not locating my share button. I thought it would be here on my panel, but...
It's not on your panel?
No.
Okay, let's ask Anele.
Have I been given rights to the screen, Anele? Because you need, I mean, the person that has set up the meeting needs to give me rights so that I can have all the...
Okay, so let's ask Anele then to reflect the presentation on the screen. Anele, just share the presentation with us because she has sent it to you.
Noted, Chair.
And go to slide number 7. I think she was about to start with UniZulu.
Are you able to see, Chair?
Yeah, have you selected the presentation? It does not come in. We can see your screen, but lots of documents.
Yeah, it's a...
So just go to the presentation, Anele. Okay. All right, CEO, you can proceed now. You've got, I'm sure you can see slide number 7 on the screen.
Yes, Chair. In terms, what I was trying to say is that those numbers are there, and I am not going to really look into the numbers. I'm hoping that the members have had an opportunity to go through the numbers to be able to see exactly what are the kind of things that we looked into and the kind of statistics that we received from UniZulu specifically. And I was wanting to then rather, Chair, if I'm allowed, to zoom right to what are the findings and the recommendations, because from slide 7 to slide 11, we are just highlighting, the numbers. We are highlighting, the progress that has been there in terms of the numbers as well. And we are also highlighting what we felt were the challenges, as far as whether there was commitment and the likes. We had issues around, concerns in terms of interpretation for deaf students and the like. So I'm just going to, if I'm allowed, Chair, to just zoom into the area that, highlights some of the issues that we had with UniZulu, taking into account, some of the statistics in those preceding slides, Chair. When we look at UniZulu, we found that they did not have, clear mechanisms to drive gender transformation. And especially when you look at the top echelons of leadership at the institution. And we do know that, in some instances there seems to be, at least we have a transformation manager that is there, and we take it that that will also is a move in the positive direction that will hopefully give that particular person a way to be able to advise accordingly when it comes to recruitment of women candidates in some of these positions, as it has been highlighted, and to also ensure that the equity targets that they had put for themselves, that they will be in a position to then meet those. We also recommended, because as I indicated, we had issues that were highlighted that spoke to the issue of sign language. We then engaged from our reports to say perhaps UniZulu should look into appointing some sort of sign language practitioner with immediate effect, so that they are able to assist the deaf students with interpretation during lectures. And so that's the second issue that we looked into. Anela, moving now to slide 13, please. We also, obviously, the chair has highlighted that there are, policies that we look into policies and check exactly, how far, what are the kind of policies that they have, whether these policies are adopted and the like. And other than, the previous policies that we had highlighted, I think in the previous slide, we had also indicated some policies that they had, employment equity and the like. I think that was slide 9, that was at the time trying to highlight what was happening in terms of policies. In slide 13, we also, try and highlight, the policies that we have highlighted that they should be looking into putting in place. I think, Chair, I hope I won't confuse you, the members, because in as much as we are looking at a report for 2018, 2019, we do undertake follow-up processes where we have put out a report and we have findings and recommendations. Each year we go back, each financial year we go back and try and check how far the respondents that we would have engaged with on some of these hearings are, in terms of ensuring that they bring or they have what is it that they have done on our recommendations, have they taken them forward and the like. And so we took into account that we recommended that they should urgently look into adopting a gender policy, gender-based violence policy, and sexual harassment policies. These are important policies, Chair. I'm sure as members would agree that are right at the heart of some of the issues that we have seen happening. Gender-based violence has been rife in our society, but even more so we have seen, some of the issues that were happening in our universities. And so it was quite important for us to ensure that they look into that. A gender policy is a policy that would also assist them in ensuring that they are able to gender mainstream properly when they run their business at the university. We also recommended that they should look into putting gender transformation as one of the key performance indicators in the contracts of senior managers and as well as the gender transformation officer. And we were doing this because we do find that a lot of times when you engage with the executives on issues around gender transformation, you just get a one-liner that just says, we can't find women. And so we don't think that is proper. As a commission, whenever we engage with institutions, we try and say they must think out of the box. They must go beyond, the call of duty in ensuring that we achieve and realize our gender transformation agenda as a country. And the only way to be able to do that is to ensure that we have proper policy environment that will allow for this to actually take place. In terms of having all the policies, the right policies that will assist, the policies that will ensure that our environment is accommodative of our female folk, but as well to take it further to ensure that the executives do have a specific thing on their performance agreements that then says where you appoint, where you have appointed, what have you looked into, have you been able to appoint? Because a lot of times people just have these plans. The plans are there. You may find that we want to reach so many people, but there isn't anything else that actually is put in place to support and ensure that those particular plans actually take place and we are able to reach the kind of targets that we would have put for ourselves on some of these processes. Next slide, at 14, we are highlighting in this slide that because at the time we could not get a properly disaggregated data as far as people with disabilities was concerned, we had then requested them to ensure that they are able to make effective use of the recruitment policy to include persons with disabilities in their workforce. Employment equity is a legislation that all of us are supposed to adhere to, and I think a lot of institutions really suffer when it comes to issues around including persons with disabilities in our workforce. There are percentages that the country has put forward that all of us are supposed to adhere to, and it's one of the challenges that we highlighted. When we were having engagements with the university at that point in time, we also had, some complaints or some issues that were coming around that highlighted the fact that in this particular university, when students are pregnant, there was those allegations that when they are pregnant, they get expelled from the campus residence when they are in their last trimester. and so we then also indicated to them that this is what we has come to our attention, and we will be investigating that as the commission in order to check in terms of what has happened, whether there's veracity to those allegations and the like. So that's what we had highlighted, and so we then decided that we will be able to still continue in terms of looking into what needed to be done as far as that particular point was concerned. So the idea was we'll then utilize Section 11 that gives us investigative powers to then look into that specific allegations as far as a pregnancy is concerned. There's a report, Chair, that we have highlighted, so I'm not really going to get too deep into some of these things. The next slide, we were looking at Nelson Mandela, and similarly to what we saw in UniZulu, we still looked into quite a number of processes taking into account issues around gender transformation, rape culture and sexual assault and the like. And so we also gave them in similar way, we gave them the questionnaire, and we were able to then get, the number of academic staff and try and break down that into various percentages in terms of what was there. So I won't also, similarly with the previous one, I won't get into the specific percentages. Safe to also highlight that NMU had actually also during our engagement indicated the kind of number of sexual harassment cases that they were dealing with and the like. That information is also there under slide 17 in terms of what needed to be done. And as Chair had said, we do look into quite a number of things, especially where there are these issues on gender-based violence, whether there's proper security that is there, and there were quite a number of issues, that came out in terms of them having CCTV and regular meetings with SAPS and the like. So that information was highlighted to us. Quickly, if I can just highlight that we as the Commission observed that there was progression in respect of gender representation in terms of academic staff. If you look at where they were in 2005 and at the point when we were engaging with them, there was that move to 51%. Top senior management positions, they do favor women, and men, dominate. Men dominate in the other, professional qualified bands of management, mid-management, and also unskilled. So we also observed that NMU falls short in respect of a gender, parity of staff members in the faculties of science, engineering, and the like. And in respect of this professionally qualified bands, we highlighted that they may just need to see, what they need to do. We raise a red flag there to say that more women, should also be used to populate these other bands, these other professional bands, especially looking at what we are trying to do as an institution when it comes to engineering faculties, the science faculties and the like, having gender issues there and not having a requisite number. Even with students, we know that we have a similar issue. We also noted that people with disabilities were also underrepresented. Looking into obviously the percentages that the country has put in place, and so the idea was that even though we recognize that they had sort of absorbed at the time an excess of 900 previously outsourced workers, which then obviously had to skew their statistics. When you look at before that particular policy of getting people absorbing the outsourced staff members, they still had quite a reputable number of people with disabilities, looking at it from the perspective of the targets that we have as a country. But however, because they had just put in place those particular strategies, then those particular numbers were thrown out. And so we then did make that particular observation to say, now that the outsourced has now increased the numbers and now their percentages are falling short, they need to then come up with further strategies to ensure that they are able to reach the targets as have been put in the country. We also commended them on their integrated policy framework, which actually incorporated gender transformation as far as the objectives of that policy was concerned. And we noted that despite NMU holding an extensive policy framework, we still had a concern that there is inadequate flexi-time policy, childcare policy, and we wanted them to explore this. So when we look into policies, we look into the kind of policies that these institutions have and check whether these policies are able to create an enabling environment as far as employment of female candidates are concerned. And in as much as we were quite happy with some of the policies progressively that they have put in place, we still felt that there are further things that they can actually put in place to ensure that they are able to even much more ensure that their enabling environment is actually fertile. So we had then said they must then look into issues around flexi policies. And by the way, flexi time policy goes for both genders and the like, childcare facilities, so that people can be able to do their work without thinking I have to go that way and leave the child there and whatever. So it is some of the things that we then engage with them, with a lot of institutions when we do gender transformation, just to say that will create a much more fertile and enabling environment to ensure that we get women. We also found that their policies were not reviewed biannually. And so we recommended that they must, commit to have their policies reviewed, so that we also take into account, there are changes that happen in our legal framework. There are new ways of doing things. It's always an important thing to ensure that we have all institutions look into their policies every now and again and review and update them accordingly.
I'm just worried about time.
Yes, Chair.
Can you please just wrap up in the next 10 minutes? I think the 40 minutes allocated is almost like done. So if you can wrap up in the next 30 minutes at, let's see, what time is it now? At 5 minutes past 4, then you can conclude.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. I think, Chair, thank you for that. When you look really into Plaatje as well, we do find the issues of underrepresentation as far as top management and the like is concerned. We really at Plaatje saw quite a huge number or percentage of male domination in some of the top management positions. I think we have put there 90 to 10%, and so that was the biggest issue that we also had that we needed to engage with. People with disabilities as well was one issue that we had raised, that we found that there was absolutely no one within the employ that had that was within that categorization. And we also, the same way that we picked up issues around the deaf and the visually impaired students, we found that there may be a level of discrimination there when the institution does not make provision, proper provision for impaired students. We also found that there are some policies that they don't have, which policies we thought are important. Policies on gender, HIV and AIDS, succession, career pathing, staff retention, and the like. Those are some of the policies that we had found that they didn't have, and some of the policies do not even refer to provisions of some of the protocols that we are following, which if they do may just also assist them in ensuring that they are able to reach some of the targets and improve on some of the elements that we have highlighted. We recommended that they allocate a budget to support gender transformation and come up with some programs and some initiatives that will ensure that women are developed and so accelerate their promotion, looking into the fact that we're looking at 90% as opposed to 10% of women in some of these positions. We observed that they didn't have a sexual harassment policy that was applicable to students, and we recommended that they develop one and also extend the scope of application, or rather even look into extending the scope of application of the one that they had that was looking into staff members only. We found that they don't have programs in place to deal with issues around gender-based violence and the scourge, the programs in place to support victims of gender-based violence, but as well which will then discourage the possibility of withdrawal of cases and the like. And so those are some of the issues. When it comes to University of Mpumalanga, we also, observed that they had appointed an executive director who forms part of management, who was also a gender transformation manager. And we were, quite happy because a lot of times you see some of these gender transformation managers being at a lower level. We recommended the implementation of an employment equity plan to ensure that they are able to transform properly. And so we also indicated that they must institute strict measures such as dialogues, workshops and campaigns and the like to sensitize the community on some of the policies that they have, like your sexual harassment and the like. We had highlighted a lot of things, and we have also given them a sense of what are the kind of policies that they should be looking into. As far as the DHET is concerned as well, like I said, we do engage with them and look into some of the things that we think they should be doing for the department itself, but as well in terms of support that they give to institutions of higher learning. And looking into quite a number of issues that we had quite a number of recommendations that we had given to them. The importance of gender mainstreaming policies that must be in place, and if DHET leads by example and has some of these policies, we have no doubt that even some of the institutions of higher learning will be in a position to then follow suit. So I won't read through, Chair, due to time constraints, as was highlighted. The recommendations are there. They are very clear that we made to DHET, and we will be happy to take questions. I think the biggest thing that we also wanted DHET to do is to deal with the issue of the scourge of gender-based violence, in terms of finding ways to ensure that there are policies that are there within institutions of higher learning that will look into some of these processes. And we are aware that at some point the higher education, HIV and AIDS had some process where they had then put in a draft policy that was supposed to guide institutions of higher learning in terms of what to deal and how to deal with issues around gender-based violence and the like. However, from where we're sitting, we still are not sure exactly how far that process was. We were invited when the draft was being engaged at some point, but we think that it's something that still needs to be looked closely into in ensuring that that policy is adopted and is able to guide a lot of institutions. We see people doing different things, and depending on whether you have a good relationship with SAPS and the like, that's why we thought it would be important that at DHET level there is the policy that is put in place as a guideline in terms of what institutions of higher learning should be doing. In conclusion, Chair, we have noted that transformation within tertiary institutions is really taking place at a slow pace, with women and people with disabilities still being underrepresented in a number of levels, whether it's top senior and in some instances academic positions. And the measures that are put in place by institutions of higher learning have not necessarily progressively increased women and people with disabilities in some of these positions. The commission, however, will continue obviously to monitor the progress, and we keep calling institutions to come back so that we engage with them to see how far they are as far as progress is concerned, and we are able to then take it forward, Chair, and hopefully be in a position to know how far they are and what are the kind of problems that they do have. We do also give them advice whenever we look into their policies. We do say you must go back, put your policies in place, and you are welcome to give those drafts to us so that we can then look into them and make inputs. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, CEO. Maema, thank you for the presentation. I see there are hands from two members. I don't know whether they are indicating their intention to engage with the report as soon as we are done, or they want to comment now, because we are still left with one presentation on Biovac. Can I check from Honorable Pozolo? Why is your hand up?
Yeah, to engage with the report, but I'm happy to wait. Biovac at this stage.
Okay. All right. Let's wait for the next presentation, and then we can engage. There's somebody's mic. Somebody has got his mic on. Please, let's just mute the mic. Please, let's just get all the participants to mute their mics so that we don't get some disturbances. There is a noise. I think there is a child who's playing around, and so we can hear the sound of the child. So if we can get whoever's mic is on, please just mute the mic so that you don't get to be disturbed. All right, can we hand over to the department? I think it's the DTG. You will then introduce your delegation and take us through.
Thank you so much, Chair and honorable members. My name is Mboneni Mope. I'm the DDG for Technology Innovation at the Department of Science and Innovation. I'm going to give a very brief introduction, and then I've got joining me here Ms. Claudina Lutz, who is the Director for Health Innovation in the department. And then I've got the Chief Executive Officer of Biovac, Dr. Murena Makwana, who is going to do the presentation. Just a very brief introduction, honorable members. Biovac is the South African vaccine company, which is one of the few in the continent, and I think Dr. Makwana will provide some more details in that regards. But it is the company where the state owns 47.5% shareholding, and it was established primarily to revitalize some of the capabilities around vaccine manufacturing that were lost just post-democracy. So I think in the presentation, Dr. Makwana will be able to take us through where we've come from, what we have done to try and reposition Biovac, and where we are today, especially given the current challenges around the need to be able to respond to global outbreaks of epidemics such as the one that we're dealing with. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Makwana to take us through the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and thank you, Mboneni, for having introduced the company and myself. I have a presentation to share. I believe that the committee may have received the presentation already. The one that I'm sharing will be a slightly amended version, but the contents are the same. And I trust that the presentation is now up on the screen. So what I will do, Chair, if I can, is around the outline. I would like, firstly, before I talk about Biovac, is to talk about the vaccine, because a lot of people do not understand the importance of vaccines, or if some of them do not fully recognize what is needed to develop a vaccine. So I'm going to talk about that. I will then go into Biovac, and if we do have a little bit of time, I can talk about COVID-19 and the challenge that not only South Africa has, but that Africa has as far as the vaccine is concerned. Therefore, starting with the world that we live in. So this slide is a picture of what Gavi put up. Maybe I must start by sharing with members how the ecosystem within vaccine works. So many of you know about immunization, and vaccines are mainly there to prevent diseases, and not as a treatment option, but to, as a form of prevention of diseases. Now, what this slide is showing is that Gavi undertook a study where they said that amongst some interventions, and they've taken some interventions. So starting on the right of your slide, there's the cardiovascular disease research, government bonds, community health workers, public infrastructure, preschool education. And they say if they have to compare any of those interventions in terms of the return on investment as a country, which one do you get the best return? And immunization certainly comes out as number one in terms of saving healthcare costs, low wages, and productivity due to illness. Now, many of you may ask, who is this Gavi and who did this type of work? So Gavi is an organization. It's a global alliance for vaccines that was established about 20 years ago. And its main purpose is to raise funds for the least developed countries. And it raises funds from mainly the G7 countries, the likes of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And once those funds are raised, they then procure vaccines at a large scale, mainly for the least developed countries. I will take you through some of that mechanism, but I just wanted to maybe start by, for those that may not fully appreciate, but I would like to believe that most Africans believe in immunization, but that the return on investment of any dollar that gets saved, that there is quite a significant return, and hence government ought to continue investing in vaccines. This slide, Chair, just shows you the difference in terms of the world that we live in when it comes to the dynamics of vaccines. So at the top, if you look at what is in the middle, that line, that red line, is that on the left is industrialized countries, and on the right is developing countries. So the population, as we know, is mainly in developed countries. That's the orange bar. The burden of disease, of vaccine preventable disease, is mainly in the developing countries. However, when it comes to the value of vaccines in terms of where vaccines, particularly from a value perspective, it lies more in industrialized countries. So why is this important, Chair? This is quite important because as I take you through the story of Biovac and what's happening on the continent as far as vaccine manufacture, many of you may wonder, why do we not have vaccine manufacturing capability if Africa is a place that needs the vaccines more? So yes, we have the burden of disease and we have the high level of population. However, the procurement mechanism and how the value lies is more skewed towards industrialized countries. Hence, the manufacturing is mainly even positioned there. But let's talk about manufacture. So let's talk about who's manufacturing vaccines and where in the world. And so you will see that when you look at the dots, this just doesn't necessarily talk about the number of vaccine manufacturers. There are a lot more out there, but what is demonstrating is where they are located. So we have large multinational organizations, many of them that I'm sure you hear about on a daily basis, that are based in US, Europe, and some of it are based in Australia. And yet you have the developing world manufacturers, many of which, if you just look at where a lot of those green dots are focused, are mainly in Asia. India is a large manufacturer, China is a large manufacturer, and we have Indonesia and others that are manufacturing vaccines. And we have some also that are in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, and others. However, when you look at the continent of Africa, I mean, there are only 4 dots there, and the red dot at the bottom being Biovac. However, the rest of the dots that are up there is one institution in Senegal, one in Egypt, and one in Tunisia. And their capacity is extremely limited, and a lot of what they do is either for domestic use, and a lot of them don't have international reach, maybe with exception of Senegal, but they have very limited manufacturing capability. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is that vaccines are most needed on the continent of Africa. However, the manufacturing capability does not exist. And this essentially, Chair, goes to what Mr. Mboneni Mofe started off with, in that this is essentially what gave birth to the likes of Biovac, when government had the vision in the late 90s to say South Africa should surely plug a gap of some sort. Just expanding further about the procurement mechanism. So I think I've outlined how vaccines are procured. So what this picture is showing is that most of the African continent is dependent on donors for vaccines. So if you look at the top, so a lot of the value of what's going into these countries that are shaded in either dark blue or light blue. So $1.5 billion is essentially being procured for these countries. 2.35 billion doses are actually going into these countries, and 2,600 shipments. So there's quite a lot of vaccines that are going through there. Now, that is what the likes of Gavi are procuring for those countries. Now you will see, where does South Africa fit into this picture? South Africa is shaded in white, and it's shaded in white because it's purchasing vaccines out of its own pocket, just like many other middle-income countries are, or like other well-developed countries. And there's a criteria that WHO and others use about the economic status of a country. They use a GNI per capita, and if you're above a particular number, then you're not eligible for donor funding. So what does this mean, Chair, and in terms of vaccine manufacture? Essentially, it says that the African continent is in need of vaccines. However, Africa does not buy vaccines itself. It's leaving that to the large donor organizations that are based in Denmark and Geneva and others. And so the pool procurement that happens there, that's how the rest of the continent gets supplied. Therefore, it's extremely difficult for many countries to establish their own vaccine manufacturing capability, because even their own countries are not buying regionally. Their own treasury does not allocate money for local procurement of vaccines. So these are some of the challenges as we go through that we have to face in terms of how to not only supply the domestic market, but to also be able to have international reach. So I thought that maybe with these few slides that I should just paint the picture before I go into Biovac. But also, just to have this quote here from WHO. So WHO also looked at technology transfers, and essentially they say that it takes between 5 to 10 years in terms of getting technology transfers. So what does this mean? And I'll take you through our story. Vaccines is an extremely difficult area of pharmaceuticals. So we are part of the pharmaceutical world. However, we occupy a niche space, being the biologicals. And that is an extremely difficult space that we work in. If I can just make a simple example, Chair, in terms of how I like to describe the world of vaccines. Because you're dealing with bacteria and viruses that you have to transform and weaken them and add other issues into it. How you produce vaccines, I like saying to people that we're a little bit like farmers. A farmer would have his piece of land. He would have the same people that are working on the land, but he would get different yields each year. So even if you have the same crop of maize, you have the same infrastructure, but you get different yields. Because being like a farmer, you're dealing with natural products and the rain and everything else. Vaccines and biologicals are somewhat similar to that. It doesn't mean that, there's what we call batch-to-batch variation. So what you're doing today, even if you're doing the same thing tomorrow, there may be some changes because you're dealing with live products and bacteria and things that are really coming from nature, if I can try and simplify it that way. So Chair, this is the first section that I just wanted to open up with, so that honorable members can be able to understand why vaccine manufacturing is so rare on the continent, and why it's so difficult and why it's so capital intensive. But let me go to what's happening at Biovac and who we are. So this slide, Chair, it gives you a little bit of history in that South Africa actually used to have vaccine manufacturing capability that was established in the 50s and the 30s and the 60s. There were 3 institutions. two of which were based in Johannesburg, and that was the NIV and the SAIMR, and one was based in Cape Town, being the SVI, the State Vaccine Institute. You will see when they are established, and you will see that they used to produce some of the vaccines, some of which are still needed. Now, I must make a disclaimer that these vaccines were produced using very old technology. So it wasn't the modern technology, but they worked for the time that they needed to. The production ceased between 1995, 2000, and 2001. And this was before my time, Chair, but essentially from the mid-80s, with the sanctions and when apartheid was starting to when it started to see the light of its cessation. Obviously, the economy was in a bad shape, and at the time, the government of the time didn't invest in the likes of vaccine manufacturing capability. So over a course of about 10 to 15 years, these institutions essentially came to a standstill. And at that time, the biotechnology world was going in a different direction. It was booming and it was going up. However, at that time, the state before 1994 was not investing in vaccine manufacturing capability. Post 1994, again, it was before Biovac's time, there was a review that was done between 1994 and 1999 about what needed to happen. And essentially, a decision was made to revive vaccine manufacture, but in a manner that would not repeat the previous mistake of state-owned and having other issues impacting on it. And a PPP was then formed. There were bids that were ran, and just to fast track is that culminated into a public-private partnership that started in 2003, where the state still retains a significant shareholding, as per what Mr. Morford described when he started, and the Biovac consortium, also led by management, has an equity stake. And essentially, our mandate is to establish vaccine manufacturing and ensure that there's a supply, there's the smooth supply of vaccines throughout the country. The formal PPP comes to an end this month, in actual fact, and now Biovac is participating in the tenders that Department of Health has taken out. So the era of the PPP, as how it was envisioned in 2003, is coming to an end, and now we're getting into a new era, being a company that has government shareholding, and that's what we are getting ourselves into. Let's talk a little bit about what we are doing and what we stand for. In the middle, Chair, of this red block is that we want to be a center of excellence rooted in Africa for the development and manufacture of affordable quality vaccines for Africa and the developing world's needs. Those words were chosen carefully. Number one, we want to be a center of excellence. We are rooted in Africa, which we have already outlined why the need is there. We want to make sure that whatever vaccines that we can make, that they're affordable, but they're also of quality. And we want to make sure that the developing world also benefits from what we are going to do. And that's our vision. And around our vision is issues of establishing vaccine production capability, economic viability, retention of vaccine production skills, establishing R&D capability, create a platform for export, and finally enable BBBE. And this is what from the start has been guiding Biovac in how it's been going about. So this picture that I'm presenting, Chair, is what we took over. So in 2003, we took over one of those entities. That was the State Vaccine Institute. The others had been transformed to what is now the National Health Laboratory Services in Sandringham in Johannesburg. But the State Vaccine Institute is what we took over. And you will see that there's a picture of what it was like pre-2003 and what it has undergone and transformed. So this is how it's looking like. We are located not too far from Parliament, and in Pinelands, so we're really between the airport and the city. And this is how our facility has been able to transform. This picture, Chair, and I won't go into a lot of the technical details. I think the slides are there. What I'm trying to demonstrate with this, and maybe I can just go clockwise, starting from the left, is to say that we have quality control labs. Quality control is a very important thing. You need to test whatever comes out of the facilities. You need to test and make sure that the vaccine works. You need to test that those vaccines are sterile, that they're not going to be harmful. You need to test and make sure that they work. And you also need to test the environment in which the vaccines are made. So the quality control is something that's quite important, and that regulatory authorities scrutinize quite a lot. Cold room storage is quite important. Vaccines are typically a cold chain product. Essentially, they need to be in the fridge between 2 and 8 degrees. Because they are biological products, they need to remain in the fridge. A little bit like milk, but obviously in a little bit more sophisticated infrastructure than how you would put milk. And the other buildings are essentially where we manufacture. So what we call building C and C1 and all of those is where we actually manufacture the vaccine. So I won't go into, for the sake of time, into the technical issues around that. If you had to go into the facilities, which many of us, even myself as the CEO of the company, are not allowed to go into, because these are sterile facilities. You can see how the people gown up, and this is how our facilities look, and this is how our people work in those environments. You must understand that vaccines, mainly, a lot of them get given to kids. Obviously, the adult vaccines like the flu vaccine, and the future vaccine is like COVID vaccine is likely to be an adult vaccine. But we're giving vaccines to healthy people, and we should not do any harm. So the environment under which we work has to be strictly regulated. All of this infrastructure has to be maintained. Whether you are doing one vial or whether you're doing all of this has to be maintained. This goes on to the high cost of maintaining the infrastructure, and why many people dare not even come into the sector. I mean, if you look at South Africa, we have very many pharmaceutical manufacturers. However, nobody has naturally gravitated towards vaccine manufacture because it's such a very expensive and very labor-intensive and capital-intensive infrastructure that has to be kept up. And also, to some extent, some of people see the returns not being as lucrative as the traditional vaccine manufacture. So what have we done in terms of enabling vaccine manufacture? We have undergone a strategy that is what we call a reverse integration strategy. And starting on my right, we've been doing packaging and labeling. And the logos that you see at the bottom are some of the partners that we have. So we partner with various companies, both from the East and from the West. So we have partnered with a Cuban company called Hebert Biotech. They were one of our earlier partners. And hepatitis B vaccine that essentially gets given to most of South African children is coming from Cuba. We do some of the packaging and labeling. We have a company from Denmark called AJ Vaccines. The BCG vaccine against tuberculosis comes from that company. We have a company, both Bionet and Biopharma are giving us the measles vaccine that is also being supplied. We're working also in the West. We are working with companies, multinationals like Sanofi and Pfizer, who have enabled technology on the latest of the products that they have. So these are they're just not giving us the crumbs, but they're giving us, call it the creme de la creme of the vaccines that the Department of Health is using in what is called the expanded program on immunization. So we have a technology transfer with a French company called Sanofi, where we're going to be filling some of the vials. So we have a tech transfer that we established. It took about 7 years, and I'm very happy to announce, Chair, that in August we will be commencing that technology transfer, and really you'll be seeing vials going out of Biovac to the facility coming out of that. At the moment, we've been doing packaging and labeling of that product, but now we're going live with a sterile manufacturer. With Pfizer, I'm also happy to announce that we are doing a technology transfer. That technology transfer actually has to do with formulation, what we call the blending of the vaccine. Let me say the technology is a little bit more complex than just blending. So that's allowing us to go upstream, because ultimately Biovac wants to go towards product development where we can own our own technologies, where we can also be able to export. So it's a gradual process, Chair, that we need to follow. And ultimately, we are also into product development. So we haven't also forgotten that we also have a mandate around product development, around bacterial vaccines. And we have an exciting vaccine called GBS that I won't have the time to take you through, but just to know that we're also investing time and effort and also seeking additional funding in terms of extending our own product development that we can internationalize. Chair, I am supported by a staff complement that is 314 strong. We treasure our people, and I must be very proud of the Biovac staff. You will see on the left that not only are we 314 people, but that we have a relatively low turnover of staff. And we believe that's because our staff really believe in what we do. They believe in immunization. They believe in sterile manufacture. They believe that we are a unique company that they would want to work for because they don't have other opportunities elsewhere to do. You know, anybody that wants to work in this space has to go to Europe or elsewhere. So we believe that we can attract the skills and retain them, and doing it in a manner that is transformative. A lot of what happens is that people are saying this is biotech sector, we can't find the skills, we can't do all of that. However, I think we can certainly prove that it can be done. You can be a transformed, highly skilled company. And so all of the pillars that we follow according to the Triple BE legislation, whether it's about shareholder, management control, employment equity, all of these we can definitely demonstrate that it's possible in the South African context. So I think that's something that we're very proud of, and we obviously, our talent is something that we follow. So we have what we call our A players and our B players, and we nurture our staff very much. The next slide, Chair. I'm also not going to go through a lot of detail for the sake of time, but just to maybe hone in on the pie graphs, the one in the middle, that shows that we do employ quite high caliber skills. So we contribute to the knowledge economy. So we have a lot of our staff. You can see that a lot of them are either having diplomas, bachelor's, master's, honors, and PhDs. And these are South Africans. You know, we have, I think, only one foreign national the last time we checked. But everybody else is South African, and you could see that we spend quite a lot in the second pie chart in terms of skills development. And those skills development are varied between technical skills, soft skills, internship, and leadership. And we also work quite closely with the Department of Science and Innovation in terms of the internship development and to bring in interns that can also be shared with the rest of the sector. Moving on, Chair, and again, I won't go through the details of this slide that is reflected, but I just wanted to reassure members that what we are doing is quite impactful, that it can even be measured in money terms. So we employ 314 people. Okay, we import and supply vaccines. We do packaging and labeling, and we're going into filling. How do we translate all of that into economic terms? So we did a study that demonstrates that of the 1.7 billion rand that the state spends on children's vaccine, that because of Biovac's existence and essentially the people that we employ, the engineering services and the surrounding ecosystem that we have, that Biovac contributes 650 million to the South African economy. This is even before taxes are included. So it's a positive impact. So the net amount is actually about 1.1 billion rather than the gross amount of 1.7 billion. So I'm hoping that I'm talking to the converted here, that the efforts that are there in terms of bringing up biotech sector can be demonstrated to work. We still have a very long road to walk and a very long path. But we have something that at least South Africans can be proud of. It just needs to be nurtured, it needs to be supported, and it needs to go further. My last point here, or my last section, let me say, is around how does COVID vaccine, I'm sure a lot of honorable members are asking, okay, so we've heard this, so what's happening as far as COVID vaccine is concerned? So just to remind honorable members that, again, it's going back that Africa is not geared up for COVID vaccine manufacture. Whether it's COVID manufacture or it's even flu vaccines, that we are not necessarily in a position to respond to vaccine preventable diseases. And I think this is why we continuously seek support, not only of the Department of Science and Innovation, but of Department of Health, of Treasury, of DERCO, or all government stakeholders to say, can we grow this sector in a manner that can plug the gap, not only for South Africa, but for Africa? We want to build the little that we have in order to plug this gap. So at the moment, we are not ready for COVID vaccine, which is why a lot of the headlines that you will hear, I'm sure you've heard many companies and many announcements around. The US has made many announcements as a government. They're putting billions into supporting the vaccine manufacturers that are mainly in the US, the Pfizers of the world, the J&Js of the world. You'll hear about that. I'm sure in Europe you'll hear about what the UK government is doing in supporting the likes of AstraZeneca, GSK, Sanofi in France, and all of that. The Japanese government is also doing that. And that's because they already have some existing infrastructure, and that's large infrastructure. Okay? And I think COVID is reminding us that we should be looking towards the future so that we can respond to the next pandemic. COVID is here now, and we will live with it now. However, these pandemics are not going away, and Africa cannot be left behind. Unless we start now, in 2030 or 2040, we will still be talking about the same thing. And our successors are going to be pointing fingers at us and say, but you should have learned from COVID. What did you do knowing that? So what we are doing as Biovac is that we have limited infrastructure and we cannot do everything. Now, the technology platforms are quite varied when it comes to vaccine manufacture. And what we did, and together with the DSI, we said that if a vaccine was to come out of the manufacturers that are developing it, where can Biovac play a meaningful role? So we cannot develop a COVID vaccine. We are too small, and it's a viral-based vaccine. We are mainly on the bacterial side of, that's what we've, at the moment, been able to develop. But if a vaccine was to come, where would it come from? So I won't go into the details, but just to show members where what we have done is that we've looked at the vaccine platform, and that is what is the column on the left. You know, there's some RNA-based vaccines, DNA. That is what is on the left. And then we looked at developers and say, who's developing these vaccines? And that if Biovac, and then we've tried to match what the developers are doing and where Biovac's infrastructure can fit in. So you will see that others, let's say the blocks that are in red, the biosafety levels that are required, Biovac does not have that infrastructure. However, on some, we can certainly play a role, whether it's on the formulation or finishing side. And the DSI has been quite active and working with DECO and others in sending feelers out, and we as Biovac are also trying to do to those that are developing a COVID vaccine, raising our hand and say, Biovac is here, South Africa is here, can we work together? And many of you may have also heard from what the president's speech was, that we are open to receive technology from those that have it. So in the short term, this is what we can do, Chair, as Biovac. We can plug in some gaps. We just are seeking the right partners that can enable us to do this, because as we know, everybody's going to be selfish, and all governments are going to try and hoard. So how are we going to be able to open up? And we need to find innovative mechanisms, and we need to use the lever of government to be able to have the bilateral discussions for us to be open up, so that Biovac also plays its role not only for South Africans but also for Africans. I'm coming towards the end of my slide, Chair. From my presentation, and again, I won't go through the details of this one. However, in the short term, and those are just in words, we can probably plug in a gap of about 10 million vials, and depending on what we can put into those vials, and that can essentially translate to about 20 to 30 million doses that we can produce for South Africans. Or if we can export, that would be fantastic. However, we also need to look towards the future. A lot of companies that we've engaged with are saying, Biovac, yes, you need some biosafety levels. What can we do? And we need to start thinking about the future, that what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years' time. And we need to build bigger capacity that would get into the 50 and 100 million dose for the next pandemic, or even for routine vaccines. That needs additional funding, but that also needs a lot of support. And with that, we can easily create an additional 500 jobs that would essentially be science related. So we can essentially double the capacity that we've already have had. So in summary, Chair, we're on the packaging and labeling and distribution. We've been doing that for a while and we are fine. Formulation and filling, we do have some capacity. It may be limited for larger quantities, but we do have that. API stands for active pharmaceutical manufacture. We do have some limited ones, but that's an area that even the DSR has been prodding us to say, Biovac, how about we go to API manufacture? So it's something that we are looking at. And we really need to start looking at large-scale manufacture. And we've done some high-level costing. It's going to be way over R1 billion. I mean, it requires quite a lot of effort and money in terms of getting to the scale that other countries would have. But in that, we cannot do it alone. So, Biovac will obviously do its part. We need technology transfer partners, and that's what we've put there in yellow. And we need an enabling environment, and I think this is where government can help in terms of making sure that the procurement framework is important. We need to be supported by the likes of Department of Health in terms of an enabling and making sure that local procurement continues. If we cannot supply locally, then we could just as well shut shop. So we need to make sure that other government departments that are procuring vaccines, like the Department of Health, continuously support local procurement. Development finance institutions, we're already working with the likes of IDC that need to support us, especially if we want to expand. The regulatory environment is also quite important. And all of this needs to come together in order that we make sure that we have South African-made vaccines that would be not only for South Africa, but for the continent. So with that, Chair, that is just a short introduction into who Biovac is. This is a picture that shows you where we are located. So our facilities are just located, and I'm not sure if members can be able to see my cursor, but our facilities are located there, and limited facilities, humble facilities, and we hope that they can grow in future. So yeah, maybe I can then take questions. And Bonini, I'm hoping, you guys are quite in close with Biovac. Maybe there may be additional elements that I haven't covered that maybe need to be covered. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Probably in terms of things that you said, that the department really sees its jewel of the country, and we're hoping that in terms of planning for the future, that will continue to build towards that. There are aspects that perhaps will come up as we deal with the question. For example, what it means to have Biovac in terms of the aspect of security of supply. And that's really a very critical aspect of why we need in the country and in the continent to have a company like Biovac. Glodina, I don't know if you've got anything to add before we hand over to the chair.
No, not at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Honorable Chair. I'm going to give the mic back to you, and then we'll take whatever the honorable members would want us to take in terms of questions and clarity, etc. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Morena.
Chair is muted. Chairperson, you are muted.
Chair, I think you need to unmute.
Yeah, he's muted.
Chair.
I'll end up chairing the meeting now.
Shanaz, you have the meeting, isn't it? Can't
Yes,
you
I
unmute?
can't unmute this thing.
Thank you very much. I think the chair is struggling. I will not allow Honorable Gates to chair. As a result, chairperson will indicate if you are able to take over.
I think it's on now.
Can I?
It should be on now.
Yes, Chair, we can hear you now.
Yeah, IT, somebody here who has got rights to mute people muted me. Don't know whether it's IT or it's Shanas, and this creates very serious problems because it's very frustrating. You are speaking here, the next thing you are muted by somebody, you don't know who that person is. Some invisible hand there just disrupts the meeting. But anyway, I hope members can hear me. I was taking, I wanted to take some hands. I see Honorable Bozoli, Litsiye Kieti, and Honorable Boshoff. Those are the only hands that I saw. Before we go to the hands, I didn't get an explanation where the DG is. We didn't receive any apology from him. He normally honors our meetings. When he's not coming, he sends an apology.
Now, I saw DG on earlier. So there's DG.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, they didn't explain your absence, DG. I know you normally honors our meeting. So I was wondering.
Around the chair, thank you.
So I was wondering because normally when you don't come, you do submit an apology. Yeah, actually the issue that I thought you will clarify before we even get to the questions is the sort of the discussions that are taking place now between DSI and the Department of Health, mainly around the establishment of a pharmaceutical company, which is something that I think we were briefed earlier on, but it's something that did not come out very sharply today. And I thought that the department will start from there so that we can then understand the context from which we are engaging with Biovac and this discourse is happening. Because there are some challenges, as I understand, unless those challenges have been resolved. So maybe if the DG can just, or the DDG can just talk to that first before the members can then engage with the presentation.
Thanks very much. DG, can I go?
Yeah, yes, please. I'll add if there's a need. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So, honourable members, these are two different issues, and I think the presentation that Dr. Makwana made also highlighted that. So, we've got two different processes. One is the vaccine manufacturing, which currently in South Africa happens under Biovac. So that's what we have been presenting today. The aspect that the Honourable Chair is talking about is the one of pharmaceuticals, which will mainly be your drugs and related active pharmaceutical ingredients. Now, those are generally your chemical processes, and that's where you find you're dealing with, in South Africa, we're looking at the HIV drugs, TB drugs, etc., etc. So they are not part of the vaccine manufacturing industry and portfolio. So that's why they were not covered here. So the aspect that the honourable member is speaking to it needs to be dealt with separately, and that's the one that is not going to need Dr. Makwana. It's really going to need completely different competency. That's why he's indicated that between vaccines and drugs, the vaccines follow a typical process which is much more difficult than the ones of drugs manufacturing. That's why they are different chemical processes altogether. The one is chemical and the other one is mostly biochemical, looking at live organisms. So that's really just the clarity to make. That's why Dr. Makwana didn't mention the issue of pharmaceuticals, because they are being treated in a completely different platform.
Okay. All right. Let's just continue with the hands. I think that is also the conversation that we would like to enter into around pharmaceutical company and the progress and the discussions taking place. But for now, I think let's take the hands. We're dealing with the two presentations, members. I think we do have some time. Maybe we can engage until 5:30, and then from there we allow enough time for questions, for responses. Honorable Bozodi, you are the first, and followed by Litzie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to the Commission of Gender Equality, I found your presentation a little bit out of date. The survey that you describe, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the survey that you describe seems to have been done 2 years ago, and you did come and report on that survey to the committee at the time. And not only that, but the committee made a whole lot of recommendations. The department, I think, was called to the committee to respond to those resignations, and we took them quite a bit further. And also, it looks as though from your own presentation, you've actually been following up on the older work that you did. And you've given us no indication of what you found in your follow-up. So we don't know whether the recommendations you made in 2018, 2 years ago, have actually resulted in anything, and if so, what? And so it doesn't seem really that we're going to learn anything about the actual up-to-date situation in universities. As far as gender-based violence is concerned, in particular, at the last time you presented it, which was in 2018, we asked the department to engage universities on gender-based violence and report to Parliament. So maybe we could just, the department could remind us on what happened with that report. And then also, could you let us know what you have found in your follow-ups to your 2018 report? Because you say that there's a 2019-2020 report due. And I think it's important for us to know what's in that, because then we will know how the universities have moved forward on these issues. I found in a little bit of a what you might call mission creep for you to be commenting on AIDS, on really there's enough to do in relation to gender. We don't need to also discuss all the other matters that concern the country in relation to disadvantage. I think you really need to concentrate on gender, and particularly gender-based violence, which seems to me to be a really important issue. Then, as far as Biovac is concerned, wow, what an interesting presentation, and what an inspiring outfit you seem to have developed. Somewhere or other you mentioned that the PPP, one aspect of the PPP, will be ending in June 1920, which seems a bit of a worry, because this clearly needs a lot of money, and the government doesn't have any money at the moment. Although they are finding 21 billion to put into SAA, I don't know where that's going to come from. And anyway, from what I can see, No government department has large amounts of money. You're not going to get money from there. So surely your PPPs are the key to your vision of expanding this into something bigger. So could you just comment on the likelihood of more partnerships and bigger partnerships and how they might take you forward? And then why are you out licensing some of your work to international partners? Why can we not do that work ourselves? Is it that we just don't have the funding and the capacity? If you could just tell us a little bit more about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Bozoli. I noticed that your connectivity is not quite strong. That's why I did not insist that you must have your camera on. But please, those members who are coming in, please just switch on your camera. Honorable Itzi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mokotedi ba leboha sebaka se re sifuang. Chairperson, let me start with the first presentation on the Commission of Gender Equality. I think maybe let me first indicate that I think the Commission in their presentation today really limited their scope of work to an issue of male versus female workers. And my understanding is that gender equality covers a lot of aspects beyond what they presented today. In my view, the Commission should look at broader scope in terms of women in business and the institutions of Ireland. They covered today the youth in that space, people with disabilities in that space, and I think they really limited themselves. I think I must clearly indicate that it was indeed a little bit disappointing from the presentation. They are in the business space, there are infrastructure projects. They did not go into details as to how many youth-owned businesses, female-owned businesses, people with disabilities businesses participated in such projects or programs at institutions of higher learning. The one question I have, I think maybe the first question I have for them is that how many, or when last rather did they conduct a survey on the status quo in the sector? Is it 2 years ago? And if so, why? Why is that the case? I think if we are to work that far behind, it will take us a long time really to change the balance of forces in terms of gender-based discrimination in this sector. The second one, in May last year, before the sixth parliament, the former minister of higher education and training appointed a task team to advise the ministry on measures to prevent gender-based violence at higher education institutions. Whether the commission was consulted by the team to advise on measures to prevent gender-based violence. As we all know that the Commission has done a lot of work, at least on gender transformation at universities, despite what I've said in the first point. And what work is the Commission doing in other entities of DHET, for an example, in TVET colleges, skills development branch of the university, the CETAs, CETs, and so forth. I think maybe on the commission, maybe let me end there. Move to Biovac. I think let's welcome the presentation as presented to us. A lot of people in South Africa, I think, as we've seen with social media posts, really do not know much about Biovac. What work are we putting in to changing or to popularizing Biovac in South Africa, at least to be known that it is a vaccine producing thing, and so that people can know that at least even here in South Africa we do have such thing too. I tried to follow the leader who was presenting after, I think, the DDG on the role that they are playing in the vaccine production here in the country. Of course, given the coronavirus, the imminent presence of coronavirus here in South Africa, what role are you playing in making sure that at least we play a critical role in the production of this vaccine? I know that I've listened many times to Professor Karim, to Dr. Zwelim Kize, saying that South Africa is participating in the production or the early stages production of a vaccine, possible vaccine for coronavirus. What role is Biovac playing in that space, in making sure that making sure that we also play a critical part in the production of these things? I think maybe, Chairperson, maybe lastly, they are not telling us their challenges. I know that we have spoken before. The DG would have spoken at least openly about the challenges that they are having in the entire department of DSI. We did touch a little bit in the one of our previous meetings about Biovac. What is it that they are asking from us as a way of assistance in terms of making sure that Biovac plays a critical role moving forward in the production of future vaccines, but also the production of coronavirus vaccine that is imminent. We're told that coronavirus will be with us possibly till 2022 and so forth from the NCC. So it's very important that at least we understand that. But thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Gates. Are you there? Okay.
Yeah, just two quick questions, Chair, right? And maybe to be granted an opportunity to Bluetooth with the sentiments Chairperson have made earlier on when he was opening for the hands with regard to the pharmaceutical company that the government had intended to establish. I mean, we would all know that that discussion emanated since from 2007-9 back there. So the question is direct to perhaps not only the guys who are presenting, but together with the department in terms of the modalities that we can consider, because I can see that these guys have been more than 40%. I mean, the state is having more than 40% in this entity of producing the vaccines. So perhaps if we look into their way of doing things, what kind of advices they can perhaps give to the department and ultimately the state to fast track the establishment of a pharmaceutical company, because we all agree that it's one of the most necessities that we need at this present moment. Number two, we'll go directly to the gender-based violence. I mean the Commission on Gender Equality. And well, I'm not going to dwell much into the nitty-gritties of their presentation, but rather to ask that the department don't have the coordinated and central gender-based violence policy. That is number one aspect. Because if you are going to consider individual universities with their own gender-based violence policies, I mean, we are going to have a lot of mixed masalas in the process, and the question of accountability won't be adhered to. And on the same breath, with the question of gender representation, I think is one of the most spoken issue, at this present moment, and we keep on speaking about it. And I think this is the relevant entity, the Commission of Gender Equality, that we can perhaps register these points with them. I think the society should move away from, how we are stigmatizing or perceiving the gender representation, the gender quality. The reason why we are still having few women in leadership positions, in the most critical decision-making positions of business, is because we are normalizing this thing of the way we are talking now. I mean, we are going to always celebrating the fact that there's 50% of women in, even organizations themselves, whether political organizations, churches, and it looks like it's a celebration to them. I do not know if I'm being understood. It's like it's a huge thing, as opposed to something that is supposed to be normal. I mean, it should be normal. We are supposed to be surprised if it is otherwise, but we must not, jump and over jubilate because there's 51% of women in a particular structure. And I think this is entirely the responsibility, perhaps, of the Commission to ensure that we normalize these, issues of women being in those critical positions. I think I will leave it there. Those are the only issues, Chair, I wanted to share with the committee. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Boshoff.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to respond to the Commission on Gender Equality first by saying that it's very different if one listens to these kind of reports from an academical perspective or a theoretical perspective, and whether one has your own girlchild or a near family member far away from your home at the university, and well, as I once noted to my daughters, I said you have to grow up as feminists because the kind of men that are made today don't allow for traditional values at women anymore. A little bit tongue in the cheek, but it's a huge problem at all the universities, and that we keep count of the way in which it is fought against, I think is important. Maybe one needs a little bit more, as some of the other members said, and I will not say what I wanted to about that because I think I'm covered. Regarding Biovac, I just want to, the presenter very quickly referred to the discontinuation shortly, I think, into 1999, one of the companies, and then I think in 2001 and somewhere else, the others. And I think we had a surge of thinking at that stage, if I remember correctly, that South Africa is a developing country, not very wealthy, and should not invest too much money in kind of prestige projects for stuff that can be important just as well. In the meantime, our currency has plummeted, and I think also with the COVID-19 crisis, the idea that having the ability to make something inside your own borders and to really do things yourself was confirmed once more. And in this sense, I must say that the scientific community in state-owned enterprises or state entities, they just keep on amazing us with the passion and the commitment with which they do their work. The places that we have visited, that with oversight meetings, and also the presentations that we receive, and I think that's something that South Africa can be proud of. You get many people who have very strong ideological opinions about should any business be owned by the state. Some say yes, some say no, never. I think most people have a kind of a let it go approach. When the state muddles it up, they say we are against state ownership. When the state does it well, they say, well, it's good, because then the profits go to the people or the state or whatever, and not to a small elite. And that is the obligation on state entities to manage their affairs as such that they don't create pressure for themselves. What I want to ask from the from Biovac, we took cognizance that the president promised huge amounts of money for some sectors in COVID-19, well, let's say treating of the consequences, not of the illness, and some budgets are going to be cut. Does Biovac have clear indications whether their budget is going to be increased or going to be cut? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we get Honorable Mkhatshwa?
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologies again for the challenges I've been having today. I will have it sorted out as soon as possible. So with your permission, Chair, I'd like to continue without the video.
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, I'd like to thank both the CGE and the Department of Science and Innovation for their presentations today. Chair, mine perhaps won't be many questions, but issues that I believe that as the portfolio committee we must ensure that we keep track of how they are implemented, and that we propose them to various institutions as well, to the department and to also CGE to take into consideration. First of all, Chair, I think it must be prioritized that there is what Honorable Gieti had mentioned, a centralized formulation of policies that ought to be in all institutions as per the standards of the department when relating to issues on gender, sexual harassment, and other discriminations that are bound to be found in the higher education sector. And that goes across universities, TVETs, and CETs, Chair. It's important that there is an increased collaboration between the gender offices of the university and the student leadership present. Often there's a huge disjuncture, Chair, between gender offices of the university and the SRC, and thus you would find there's no consensus on dealing with some of these issues. Chair, also in many institutions there may be a security infrastructure plan, or even security infrastructure that is meant to ensure that when students are at risk from GBV and various other forms of violence, that students are able to indicate that. But however, that particular security infrastructure is not functioning, which does not necessarily assist us. And so if a university were to present, or an institution of higher learning were to present to the portfolio committee, they would say that they have these various security infrastructure plans or systems in place. But when you speak to students, they would tell you that the actual functionality of that security infrastructure is non-existent. Chair, we also need to really look into how we strengthen repercussions for councils and executive management committees that don't have any form of gender parity. We do want to move to a point where, in fact, there are no quotas, where we don't have to remind people, to be inclusive in the manner in which they compile their structures. But in the interim, whilst we deal with a society that is intrinsically patriarchal, we need to ensure that those quota systems are put in place in order for us to see the type of change that we want to see. Chair, I'd like to call for an increased strengthening of legal systems between universities and the South African police services and, for example, the justice system. So often there's a disjuncture between the internal processes of the university when dealing with various GBV or cases of violence, and them being reported to the SAPS and so on and so forth. And so, you find a situation where when these matters are not resolved, Chair, it becomes not only a challenge for the student who is laying the charge or making the allegation, but the alleged as well. So the finalization of these particular cases, Chair, is highly pivotal in order for there to be a conducive environment for learning. Chair, I'd like to follow up on Honorable Idzia's question with regards to the work that has been done by the CGE thus far when it comes to compiling a report on these institutions, and basically being concerned with the time frame it's taken for this compilation. What would assist in increasing the capacity of the CGE to create more recent and updated reports on issues around gender equality within the higher education sector? Chair, I'd like to find out if the CGE has made any follow-ups with the various ministerial, so the various departments after last year's, I don't want to call it, well, an uproar and a massive call for increased security infrastructure across various institutions of higher learning in response to what was sparked by Uyinene's death. There were various commitments that were made by various departments on how they will assist in beefing up security infrastructure in institutions of higher learning. Has the CGE perhaps followed up on any of those commitments to say how far have we gotten? For example, there were conversations around memezas being distributed. I think those from the CGE would know what I mean when I refer to a memeza being distributed across various campuses and other type of interventions. Here I'm concluding. Were there timeframes set for institutions that were recommended to provide or to work on various policies and to review their policies? So were there time frames set for institutions to review or formulate those policies? And if so, have they met those timeframes? And if not, which institutions are still lagging behind in terms of developing those policies? Chair, we must reiterate our concern with the issues around the Sefako Mokgato University, and that in any space, Chair, where there is the community does at large, there's no consensus and a feeling of cohesion on various appointments, particularly because of matters relating to GBV, Chair. You provide for an environment that does not feel safe, and where there's just no trust amongst those in the space, and that is not conducive for learning. Chair, I think I also just like in closing perhaps say that we are continuously seeing the link on how pivotal it is for us to ensure that the funding of of students is successful and is accessible, in order for them to ascend into postgraduate learning, in order for them to become scholars and academics, in order for us to ensure that there is an increased representation in the makeup of academics and management of institutions of higher learning. Chair, those are perhaps all all the comments that I had, and of course we welcome the presentation made by the Department of Science and Innovation on Biovac. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkhatshwa, and for all the members for raising their issues, their comments, and so forth. Mine is just one. I think it's maybe two. The first one to the Commission on Gender Equality. Now, there was a case which we requested the Commission to update us on, and I must thank you very much for giving us the documentation on the 7th of May. There is a case which was lodged by Professor Pendler, who was the Dean of Students, Dean of Education at the University of Venda. The case of sexual harassment against the Vice Chancellor then, Professor Peter Mbati. Now, the Commission investigated that complaint and produced a report on the 4th of December in 2014. Now, there are two key findings which are on that report, and I want to highlight those for purposes of those who have not read that report. Now, the first finding is that the Commission found that the allegations of sexual harassment by Professor Pendler were convincing. The second finding was that it was the Commission's finding that the failure of council and management to take the next steps after the collapse of the mediation process was a direct contravention of the university's policy on sexual harassment. So what this finding meant is that the university, after having established the mediation process and appointed a mediator in terms of their sexual harassment policy, for which mediation failed, the next step was to then request the report and then charge the Vice Chancellor. Now, the university did not follow that, and it was the finding of the Commission that that was in direct contravention of the university's policy. And therefore, the Commission recommended that the university must comply with the clause which was 5.2 of the sexual harassment policy. So this clause 5.2 says that you then must go to the next step if the mediation fails, and then there must be formal charges preferred. Now, this report by the Gender Commission was taken on review. It was litigated against by Professor Mbati and the university. And that litigation sort of resulted in some out-of-court settlement. I'm saying it's out-of-court settlement because it was per consent of the parties that the draft order was agreed to in the South Gauteng High Court on the 30th of May in 2016. Now, what I found to be very interesting and really a concern to me is that it does appear that the Commission sort of consented to be gagged, because a bigger portion of the report was then blanked out, meaning that you can't say that which you were saying in the report. Now, it is not clear why the Commission allowed itself to be gagged by that litigation. But what was also very interesting was that the recommendations of the report were not contested. So the recommendations remained as they are. And part of the issues in the recommendation refers to the findings and therefore recommend that this must happen. The minister must get involved. The university must be asked to implement the policy and so forth. Now, despite the recommendations having stood and not been thrown out of court, it does appear that the Gender Commission did not follow through. Because as we know, as of today, the university has never implemented the recommendations of the Gender Commission. There was an order which says that they must proceed, and part of proceeding was that the mediator must then give a report. I must bring it to your attention that the mediator was then requested to bring that report. Mr. Lavari, he did write a report. That very report was contested by Mr. Mbati, not in the South Gauteng High Court, but in the Toronto High Court. Very surprising. But because that was not Mr. Lavari's report, it was the report of the university. The university did not defend its own report. It's quite clear that they were acting in cahoots with the then Vice Chancellor. And as a result, that report, which was requested by the university, was set aside, where it even confirms the findings of the Gender Commission. Now, I want to find out, why did the Gender Commission not follow through its own recommendations? Because the recommendations were very clear that Professor Mbati must then be charged for the sexual harassment allegation, which the Commission found to be motivated. So nothing was done. And as we speak here today, the same professor popped up now at Supakomagatu University. He has just been recently appointed as a Vice Chancellor there. I think he started on Monday, the 1st of June. With all these allegations hanging, because these allegations were never tested in any forum after the recommendations of the Gender Commission. He was never charged. So it's a case that I find it very, very unfortunate that there was no follow through on the recommendations that was made. The same gentleman whose allegations was made and there was a finding against him, although that finding was later on gagged, so to speak, has now reappeared now. He's at another university, institution of higher learning, as a Vice Chancellor. I would like to get some comments from the Commission in as far as this case is concerned, because this is one of those classical cases where I think that the survivor or the victim of the sexual harassment was really let down by everybody. And as we speak now, the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator is still roaming the streets, not only roaming the streets, but occupying one of the powerful positions in the university. Now, the second issue, I think, is to the department. I think maybe just to say that we would require a discussion, DG. I'd hope that when we schedule this briefing, it was going to cover that issue around establishment of a pharmaceutical company and the kind of difficulties and challenges that you currently have. But I see that it looks like the memo was not very clear. But I would like to find out what will be the future of Biovac, seeing that this sort of, I don't know whether we call it an agreement that is coming to an end at the end of this month, in June. What we then obtain going forward. So yeah, those are my comments. Can we get responses? Maybe let's start with the commission, and then we conclude with the department. The chair and the CEO.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, can I go ahead?
Yeah. Who's speaking? Is it the chair or the CEO?
I was just checking with the chair of the commission if I must go ahead or she wants to start first.
Okay, the chair is on the floor. Let's start with the chair. Briefly, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity. I know that CEO will actually be responding to quite a number of questions very briefly, but there is a question that I want to cover quickly before we move to or allow the CEO to respond. There was a question that was asked about the task team that was formulated. I think it was called Honorable Leslie Litsie, who asked the question about the formulation of the task team by the previous Minister of Higher Education. And my very quick response in that regard, Chair, is that yes, I think he's quite right. Last year in May, there was a task team that was formulated by the then Minister Naledi Pandor. And this task team was appointed to advise on management and prevention of sexual harassment and gender-based violence matters. And it was a 12-month team that was going to be there for 1 year with specific, I think the terms of reference were quite specific to say this is what the task team would do. But overall, the team was going to advise on matters that are related to sexual harassment and gender-based violence in all universities. And I must say that the 9-member task team, honorable member, was without CGE. We did not participate. And we did not participate for reasons that we are an independent institution. I think our mandate does not allow us to participate in the task teams because our mandate, ours is to monitor and observe and report to Parliament. So if we are part of the team, we are not going to be able to stand outside the team and be able to monitor that task team. I think we are doing the same thing with the task teams as well as committees that are appointed by other departments like Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. There are quite a number of committees, task teams that are monitored. Ours is to actually sit outside those teams and make sure that we monitor the functioning of those teams, how those teams were actually established, but also monitor how those teams are functioning and what comes out of those teams. But I think this one was quite clear, Honorable Leslie, Honorable Bereng, that team was supposed to actually make sure that it identifies particular good governance related gaps. And those good governance related gaps within universities are some of the things that I think we've partially spoken about in terms of leadership, what is there, what is not there, and how agenda-based violence and sexual harassment issues tackled by the leaders or the leadership of universities. And if, for an example, one of the leaders, like chancellors, vice chancellors in universities, are found to be part of violating the rights or the students' rights in any other way, how does the university deal with those things? But also, I think it was around development of policies. That team was supposed to look at policy weaknesses, policy gaps, and actually come up with a recommendation. And I think the question that was asked by Honorable Mkachwa, that was saying that I think the effort was also to just try and make sure that there is a policy framework that actually cuts across all universities, that guides universities on matters related to sexual harassment and gender-based violence in institutions. So ours was to actually remain outside but continue to monitor. But unfortunately, that team was actually disbanded in a period of about 12 months. So we will continue to monitor what happens after that, and I think we will come up with recommendations. Thank you very much, Comrade Ebering. Over to you, CEO.
Okay. Thank you. It's Honorable Litsi.
Thank you.
CEO.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Litsi.
Okay.
Just to highlight, I think I will try and just quickly go through all the questions that were asked. I think Honorable Bozoli, when she came forward, one of the comments that she made was the fact that we did present before this committee on the same report. Just to clarify that particular point, we appeared before this committee in 2018. And at that point, we only had reports that related to other institutions except this. I think at the time, we even made a presentation to highlight that we were having a presentation that looked at Cape Town, Free State, Johannesburg, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Stellenbosch, and Venda, and Wits, and the like. And at that point, we made it very clear to the committee to say, there are institutions that were yet to appear before the commission, and that appearance was going to happen in November 2018 at the time. And that was the institutions that we are now engaging on. So just to highlight that the presentation that we are putting before this committee is not the presentation, it's not the same presentation that we presented previously. Because we were looking at different institutions altogether. As we highlighted, it's always difficult for us to look at, due to budgetary constraints, it's difficult to look at all institutions all at one go. So per year, we select specific institutions that we are going to be looking into, and then we are able to respond to that. And so when the committee requested us to give them this particular report, we took it that it was understood that in the previous we had actually indicated that we are still left with salt Plaatjes, NMU, and these ones that we are talking about today that we still needed to engage with at the time. And yes, indeed, we have done follow-up work as far as some of these institutions are concerned. We did work follow-throughs that were done in the financial year 2019-2020, but due to the fact that COVID and everything else, we had not as yet lodged that particular report, and so it became difficult for us to engage or try and highlight some of the issues when we know that formally we had not been in a position to launch the report with this parliament. But having said that, we do have updates. We do have instances where some of the policies that we had spoken about had been adopted by some of the institutions as we had highlighted. I think the biggest issue that we are still seeing is in the main also the issue of the movement. As it was highlighted, that there seems to be not be movement in terms of some of the seeing real transformation actually happening and taking place. And we do have instances where we had asked for people to put their key performance indicators and the like, that was not done in some of the institutions that we were engaging with. So there is a lot. There are changes here and there where we do see the policies that we have asked some of the institutions to put in place coming up. A lot of some of these institutions had adopted some of these things in around June 2019 and the like, when we were doing the work. So that report is ready, and we can be in a position even just to update the presentation if ever there isn't going to be any formal engagement in terms of going back and having a presentation on the report for the 2019-2020 report. That will give a much clearer indication in terms of what has happened on some of the things. When we spoke about the issue of gender-based violence policy, we are not also advocating for everybody to do willy-nilly as it was highlighted. The fact of the matter is, after these engagements in 2017 August, we had an engagement with higher aids. I think at the time we had the previous Deputy Minister Duduzi Manana, who had started a process at the time in terms of ensuring that there is a guide, a policy that is put. That policy was called Higher Education, Gender-Based Violence Policy and Strategy. In fact, they had sourced out the services of one service provider, Ms. Lisa Vetten, at the time, to come up with that particular policy. We went into a meeting where we were engaging and made inputs into that policy, but we don't know at this stage where that policy was. And I think even when we were in a meeting, and we hope that as we highlight some of these things, that when the committee itself meets with the department as well, they should be able to also engage the department to check in terms of how far some of these processes are, because there were processes that were started at the time in 2017, but as far as I know, we still don't have a policy and strategy that is able to guide all the institutions of higher learning, so that we don't have people doing or coming up with various things, as it were, as it was highlighted by one of the members in terms of some of the questions that were asked. In terms of the quota, I think it's important, for quota to be set. The fact of the matter is, when you look at employment equity plans that the institutions of higher learning put for themselves, they don't.
Can I interject? Can I please request you to be briefed on the question? You have got only 4 minutes remaining. Don't be elaborate, just be direct to the point when you answer question, because there are still many questions outstanding and you have got only 4 minutes left.
Thanks, Chair. Noted. The issue, we've taken note of the input from one of the honorable members that has indicated that it may be helpful, for us to also include issues, around procurement and the like. We do have a separate program where we undertake work on procurement, and we work across the board to check businesses that have been given, work for women businesses that would have gotten tenders and the like. So we do have a procurement specific report that we have that looks to across some of the sectors. I think, Chair, when it comes, I think the biggest issue that I wanted to also zoom into is the issue of Pendler. The Pendler case, I don't think that where there were specific things that were excised or blotted out, as it were, from the report, they were not affecting the actual recommendation and that's why the recommendations that we were putting forward. And that's why we did not fight that battle, because most important for the process for us was to ensure that our recommendations are staying intact, so that we can then be in a position to follow through. There were quite a number of recommendations and things that we had put forward, as the chair has highlighted. But in part, the minister then also had a specific a role that was needed to be played. We had written to the minister in terms of highlighting, taking into account that the minister will be the party that will be engaged with whenever there's going to be issues, whether it's charging the VC and the like. We wrote to the minister at the time and highlighting, you know, all the issues that we had hoped that him as the minister will be able to follow through. But as well, it also is a concern to us when, as an institution, we had put our report, we had put the recommendation even before the minister, and I take it that when any institution is making engagement or getting an engagement or engaging a VC, that the minister would have, you know, some process or some engagement. I'm not too sure what the process would be, but I take it that when we have put these recommendations and these issues before portfolio committee, but as well before the minister that would be responsible on some of these things, that the minister should be able to take those particular things forward in terms of what needed to be done. Some of the recommendations were done where we could follow through with the institution itself, issues around ensuring that they put a sexual harassment policy in place. You know, there were quite a number of other things that we needed them to do. There were also, so part of our recommendation was also even into issues around getting the mediator report. And if I remember well, there was even a second mediator report as far as these things are concerned. We took it forward. We took that matter forward to an extent that we even assisted and ensured that Professor Pendler was represented even at the labor court at a pro bono basis. So I hear the chair, you know, in terms of the concerns that he is raising, but I do think that the commission also does have, you know, limitations, which is why our mandate is such that when we find some of these issues, we are able to engage with Parliament, who would also have direct oversight over these departments, but as well where in institutions of higher learning, we also engage with the minister at the time to highlight what are the issues that we had as far as Professor Pendler's matter was concerned, and there were specific things that we had hoped that the minister will be able to take forward as far as that particular issue is concerned. And we do think that had that happened, we wouldn't perhaps be sitting in a situation where the same candidate is appointed somewhere else, as the chair has just indicated.
Okay, CEO, can I interject and request you to stop here? If there are other questions that you still have, can I please request that you respond to those questions in writing? You can respond to the committee secretariat and then it will be distributed. My apology, unfortunately, we don't have enough time. I need to give the other entity an opportunity to respond, and then so that I also have an opportunity to wrap up. Thank you very much, CEO and the chair of the Gender Commission. Can we go to the department quickly in about 6 or 7 minutes? Respond to all the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to take some of the questions, and then Dr. Makwana will do the rest. Chair, let me just start by the points that you made, because I think they're quite crucial in terms of how we organize ourselves going forward. The issue you have raised around pharmaceuticals. the DG has just indicated that we will be directed by the committee as to when we can come and brief the committee on that. So we will await that kind of invitation so that we can indeed provide an update. Of course, coming back to questions raised around Biovac, there was an issue around the popularization of Biovac and the work that it does. And we have started working with Biovac in terms of them being part of our public engagement activities. This could include your Science Week, when we have the Bio Africa Convention, which is one of our annual big convention, and any other outreaches that we have. We always now have decided that we are going to invite Biovac because we see it as a platform also to attract young people into careers that can take them into the vaccine industry. So that is what we continue to do in that regard. Now, coming to the role that we are doing in coronavirus, as the CEO has indicated, when the whole activity around the manufacturing of vaccines really came about, and this is really a global initiative. As a country, we obviously don't have nearly enough money to can invest in the development of a vaccine. However, what is really coming out, as you see, is now a global effort where different countries and companies are sharing information and data to fast-track the process of vaccine manufacturing. And as soon as the vaccine is found, one of the things that is obviously going to happen is there's going to be a need for manufacturing of billions of doses. And that will also have an impact on the queuing aspect of it. Who then becomes the first one to receive it? And that is really where, in one of the slides, Dr. Makwana has indicated that we have already identified areas in the manufacturing value chain where we can actually fit in and maybe start to take what could be the load for the African continent. So he can actually elaborate more on that. Now, the questions about the future of Biovac and what government can do. Obviously, when you look at what other countries have done in terms of their equivalent of Biovac, is that they are considered as strategic assets, which means that you protect them to the best of your ability, because the kind of gap that Biovac fills is such that if there is a shortage, you actually have a much bigger problem, even if that shortage is a week, because on a weekly basis, a number of children are getting born that must be getting vaccines that are provided by Biovac. So you then have a huge health challenge if you do not protect an asset like Biovac. And then the way we see it as a department is that there needs to be a commitment in terms of procurement. So you don't want, like as I said, other countries, you don't want your Biovac kind of asset to be competing unfairly with global multinational for you to procure from them. You need to find a way of protecting them. Now, there was a question raised around the budget cuts and how they affect Biovac. I just need to indicate here that Biovac doesn't get funding from us as a department or from government. They run as a company, and when they need money, of course, as shareholders, we then get to know what is it that they need to do, if they are going to take loans, etc. The bulk of their loans have been taken with the IDC, for example. But as a department, we are not giving any of our budget to them, unless it is instances where it's a research grant, which will then be about the development of completely new vaccines. That's where there could be a grant that comes from the department. I think I've probably addressed the question that I have in mind here until I'm going to hand over to the CEO. But the one other thing that we're looking at, of course, is as a department, as government, is to look at whether we keep the shareholding as is in terms of 47.5%, or do we go beyond 50%? So those are some of the discussions that we are still having. Dr. Makwana, I think you can take over and deal with some of the questions in the gaps where I.
Yeah, sorry, Doctor. Unfortunately, I've got 2 minutes. I hope you're going to do justice. Otherwise, you can send it to us in writing.
No, that's fine, Chair. I can certainly squeeze it in 2 minutes. And I think Mr. Mofe has essentially answered, call it 80% of the questions that were asked. I'd like to make just 2 analogies that I'm sure members would be familiar with and how we're dealing with. So I think if I can use the motor industry, so where you have the likes of BMW having a plant in Roslyn and Mercedes in East London and all of those. Because I think it was Honorable Pozzoli who was asking in terms of licensing and technology and out-licensing. So Biovac is doing similar to the likes of what BMW, Toyota, and everybody localizing. The difference, though, is that Biovac is a South African-owned company, but it uses the technology that it receives from the likes of Sanofi and Pfizer. So those are our international counterparts, and then we localize their products here. And I think the motor industry is a very interesting model because that's something that we don't have. Because if it's identified as a key strategic sector, and I would like to think that vaccines perhaps get looked at in that way, then there should be an enabling environment that allows for the sector to grow. And because it's not only Biovac that needs to exist for the next 10, 15, 20 years, we need to have other Biovacs that pop up naturally. And I think the motor industry is one that how government has looked at giving long-term incentives for industry to naturally gravitate. I think it's a good model because then you don't have to rely on the state. You then have an enabling environment. Now, how, so going to the second point in terms of how can an enabling environment be created. I'll make another example of a well-known PPP being Gautrain. Now, building a Gautrain, we know it's expensive, it's long, and it's not everybody that can do it. Vaccine manufacturing is exactly the same in terms of, people don't graduate because it's such a big ask. Now, if we take 5 to 7 years to in-license to locally manufacture, we need to have the environment that procures vaccines for that long. We cannot run in 2 to 3 year tenders. Nobody is going to set up a facility in South Africa, or it's even difficult for us to expand if the procurement is 2 to 3 years. We need to have longer contracts that enables inward investment. We then bring up that investment for local and for export. So I just wanted to maybe bring those 2 examples about how we can be supported. But I think a lot of the questions already Mr. Mwofe has outlined. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, CEO. I think you must keep doing a wonderful job there at Biovac. The report that you are giving us is quite impressive. I hope that post-June this year, there will still be more support from government, more government involvement and so forth. And as we say, we need to also have a discussion with the department. We just look at the program and identify a slot in our program. With regard to the Gender Commission, thank you very much. I think the report that you are presenting, it's a little bit old, but it's still relevant, given the fact that it has never been presented to us as the portfolio committee. And we welcome the work that you do. This case of Professor Pendler and Professor Mbati, who has been appointed as a vice chancellor there, I think it's a case that must get all law-abiding South Africans to be so enraged about what has happened here, because it just plays in the power space of a patriarchal society, where a very powerful man can basically get away with murder, in spite of all the institutions that exist in this country. Because he has got access to unlimited resources of the university to litigate. Litigate against the report of the Gender Commission. After that, litigate against each and every report that comes, because you've got the money. Nothing can happen to you. And then the next thing, you pop up again, you are at another institution, probably is going to continue with what he has been alleged to have been doing at the University of Venda. And I think we as the portfolio committee needs to take a very serious, strong stance against this. We cannot allow this situation. Ordinarily, you would know as the commission, as gender activists, that most of the time when I don't know whether to call them a survivor or a victim, comes out in the open, there's a lot at stake against that particular victim or survivor. There's a lot at stake. Most of the time, she will be up against the very powerful in society, and that person needs to be protected at all costs. So I think that we should be, as a portfolio committee, and I think we will, establish some kind of preliminary inquiry into these allegations, because they remain there. And now the guy has been appointed as at SMU, and that appointment itself was very problematic because it happened during the lockdown when we had an outstanding engagement with the University Council about a couple of things that involves governance in that institution. Then they go ahead and appoint. And now, worst of all, they come with this product. They come with this individual who still has got issues hanging around him of sexual harassment. And I think that is a matter that I think we must attend to as a committee, and I think we will make a public commitment that we will follow up this matter. But otherwise, we thank the commission, and I think continue doing the work that you need to do as a Chapter 9 institution. And I think in the preliminary inquiry that we will be having, you will come here as support and as friends of the portfolio committee. Probably will ask you also to come and present to us your role in the whole issue. Otherwise, honorable members, thank you very much for participating in our meeting today. Tomorrow we are meeting at 12. Between 12 and 3. There is another meeting, a follow-up of the National Skills Fund at 6. I'm not sure whether that will be confirmed now. I'm looking at trying to move that either to another date or to make it part of the 12 o'clock meeting. But otherwise, thank you very much, honorable members and our guests. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very progressive closing remarks, Chairperson. June is your month, I know.
Okay.